Hi, everybody. This is Eric. I'm Bruce's son. My father did not want a funeral, but he would have been thrilled to see you all here today. And it is very sad that he missed seeing you all today by only a couple of months. I want to say a few things about my father's life and the man that he was and what I learned from him. We've got over 70 years to get through, so let's get right to it. Starting with his birth in 1950, my father Bruce was born very young, at an extremely early age. Really, he was just a baby when he was born. These are his parents around that time, seen here at the cottage. This is young, hot Marg Lippert and young, hot Bob Lippert. Because my father was born at such an early age, his older sister Linda was older, quite a bit older, as he had no problem reminding anybody who asked, or even if they didn't. And she remains older to this day, though I hasten to add that my Aunt Linda is not old, she's just older. It's a coincidence that she's the same age as old people. Then came along my father's younger brother David, who very sadly predeceased him by only a couple of months. Very tragic. And finally, the baby of the family, my favorite Aunt Lori. Lori requires me to refer to her as my favorite Aunt Lori. Should there be a comma after aunt? That is a great question. The family grew up in the ancestral home. It was a house built by their great grandfather right at the edge of Victoria Park in Kitchener. And their grandparents, Nana and Papa, lived on a stone house on the opposite side of the park. And we have so many photos of the kids' birthdays, and they all seem to be photographed on the lawn of either the home on Roland Avenue or Nana and Papa's place across the other side of the park. And they're all standing there with a cake. Why? I don't know. It's a mystery to me. But here we see my father. I think there's 8 candles on the cake there, so he must be 8 years old, standing outside of Nana and Papa's house. And then when he was 9 years old, I note that the photographer managed to get 2 different overblown lighting setups here. And I particularly like that in the first photograph, my father looks happy to be holding a cake on the lawn. And in the second photograph, he looks like he's pretty ready to be done holding a cake on the lawn. This is one of my favorite photos of the kids. This is again over at Nana and Papa's house. What I particularly like is that Linda and David and Lori all look like sweet, innocent children, and Bruce looks like he's trying to look like a sweet, innocent child, but there were shenanigans. There were shenanigans on the beach. There were shenanigans on road trips. And when my father became a teenager, those shenanigans only intensified. So here we have a picture, again, obviously at the beach. That's my father. That's Jeannie Quayle, and they are dragging an unidentified other teenage girl into the lake. And I've asked a number of people, including Jeannie, and nobody can identify who this woman is. So if anybody knows, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going to be forced to conclude that Jeannie drags people she doesn't know into the lake. So be careful of that. Now, I particularly like this photograph of my teenage father for more than just the obvious reason, the obvious matinee idol good looks and the hint of the beard that was to come and the sideburns. What I really like about this picture though is this guy in the background. Who is that guy? Well, it turns out that is young Bill, if you can believe it. This is the oldest photo that we have of my father and Bill together. My father was Bill's scoutmaster. So, moving on, around this time, my father and mother, Linda, met. They allegedly met at a church youth group, if you can believe that. And they're shown here on the one photo is the day my mother graduated from nursing college. And then with incredible long blonde hair, their wedding day. That's my Aunt Dorothy in the foreground there. And then, not very long after that, in 1972, oh my God, that's me. And my mother told me a story. She said that when I was born from a very difficult labor, very long labor, and then there was an emergency cesarean at the end of that. And the doctor said, you have a healthy baby boy. And my mother said, that's not possible. I only have girls' names picked out. And then she fell unconscious. And when she woke back up, my father was there by her bedside. And he said, his name is Robert Eric. And I've already told everybody. The hairstyles are particularly great here. The mustache is particularly great here. And then in 1975, oh my goodness, that is my sister Heather. You'll note that there's still no beard here, but there's the beard. And I particularly would like to thank my mother for those haircuts, particularly the one that makes my sister's head look like a little mushroom. What, you might wonder, was my father doing for work this whole time? At the age of 18, he joined Mutual Life in the mailroom, and then over the next decade or so, gradually worked his way up to being a manager of the underwriting team. And also, while he was at Mutual Life, he was a fitness instructor. And I love these outfits, these 1970s tracksuits. They're pretty incredible. That then brings us to the 80s. The early 80s were very challenging for my family. You can see me and my sister looking not entirely like we know what's going on here at the highway sign that my mother and my father's friends rented for his 30th birthday. In the 1980s, my father came out as gay, divorced my mother, moved in with Fred Rolleman, quit his job at Mutual Life, moved to New Hamburg, bought the Magpie Cafe, and operated it successfully for many years. My father once told me that the thing that precipitated this enormous change in his life was the highway sign that said Bruce is now 30, ha ha. My father also told me that the thing that, quote, turned him gay was listening to too much Elton John. So I'm not sure that I believe either of these explanations. But moving on, my father and Fred were together for 29 years, and they were not big photo takers. This is a photo from my wedding day, again at the beach. We have very few photos of Bruce and Fred from this time. They sold the Magpie Cafe after a few years, and they kept on working in the restaurant industry until Fred tragically died shortly after he retired. But through all this time, shenanigans at the beach continued. Here are Linda and David and my father emerging from the lake at sunset. My sister had a little girl, Makani. My father loved being a grandfather. And then a little while after Fred died, I started seeing photos on Facebook of my father with that kid from the Scoutmaster photo a little while back. And in these photos, he always looked so happy. And that made me very happy. And then one day, it was Father's Day, I got an email 7 years ago, and my father and Bill got married on the beach and didn't tell anybody or invite me. But I said that getting married at the age of 66 was an act of love and optimism. And I got another father for Father's Day, so that was pretty great. And then finally, I think we all know that cancer is terrible. So that's the capsule biography. What did I learn from my father? Well, the easy stuff is easy. I learned how to recover a small boat from a capsize. I learned to love reading and rereading The Lord of the Rings. I learned to have an appreciation for the early Leonard Cohen albums. I learned how to placate an angry customer in a restaurant, and I learned how not to placate an angry customer in a restaurant. I learned a million things like that. But that's what my father did. That's not who he was. The things that I learned from my father were affection and respect and enthusiasm. Those are three things that I have always tried to bring to every relationship I have, whether it's a romantic partnership or a friendship. And I learned these from my father. He was the most affectionate man I've ever met. He always tried to be respectful, even if he disagreed with you, even if he was angry. And I think we all know that he lit up the room with his enormous enthusiasms. And did he always live up to these ideals? No, none of us live up to our ideals. If we're living up to our ideals, we should get better ideals. But he modeled them to me in how he tried. So thank you for being here today in memory of my father. I really appreciate it. And as my father always said, whenever he saw any of his cottage friends not at the beach, it's so nice to see you with your clothes on.